In this video, I'm going to go over how to create a landscape material blend. It's going to blend between three different sets of textures. In this example, I'm going to have snow, grass, and stone. Also going to go over how to make it look a little bit less tiling to reduce some of the repetition in a few different ways, and how to bring in a landscape fairly easily. So the first part is you need a height map. You don't need a height map to make a terrain, but it does make it a lot faster. I'll have a link on this to this website on the assignment, motionforwardpictures.com. There's a lot of good height maps here. They are slightly the wrong size for Unreal, but for these purposes, they will be perfect. Download whichever one you want, and then unzip it. You'll have a lot more files than you need. Get this. What you will have are all of these. You really only need, for what we're doing, the height map PNG. There'll also be an EXR, diffuse, and some other things. But we just need the PNG of the height map, which is just a black and white with gray image or gray tones depicting elevation. In Unreal, I'm in a new scene, so if you don't have this, just go to New Level and choose Basic. You can delete the floor right here, we won't really need that. And on the top left in selection mode, I'm going to go to Landscape. Might take a moment for it to load. And it won't really look any different. The environment won't look any different. But in the landscape window on the left, you want to go to New, Manage, New, and Import from File. I believe by default it starts with Create New. This allows you to sculpt and do stuff like that later on. But we're going to import because we already have something. And where it says Height Map File, click on the three dots and look for the height map. Make sure you're not bringing in the diffuse. That is the color, and we don't need that. Gonna hit Open. And by default, everything is set to 100 for scale. If you hold down right click and WASD, you can move around. And while you're holding down right click, you can use the scroll wheel to change this number up here, or you can click on it and just change that value manually, and that will increase the speed of your camera. And you might notice that this landscape looks really flat. I got one with a fair amount of mountains in it. And you need to set the scale, and in Unreal, Z is height, Z is up and down. So I'm just going to change this 100 to maybe 500 or 700. Without knowing the exact specifications for the height map from the site, don't know how to convert it perfectly to Unreal, but I'm just going to go up to 1,000. And it'll be good enough. If yours needs a different number, fantastic. This is giving you a very low resolution preview of the terrain. Once you have that set, move on down to Import. And now I have my terrain. You will probably have this little bit at the end, going all the way around it, where it is kind of just cropped off or stretched. This is because this is a 4K 4096 texture map, and Unreal I think wants 40, something a little bit smaller, so it's stretching a little bit. It's okay for this example. We don't really need it. You can always go into Photoshop and crop the image to exactly what Unreal wants, which is back here, 4097. So close. But this is all we're going to do in the landscape mode. So I'm going to go to landscape mode and go back to selection. And we're going to create a material. So I'm going to right click. You can put it in the folder and organize it if you want to. But I'm going to right click and create a material. And I'm going to call this M for Material Landscape Demo. In your outliner, click on your landscape. If you have a folder here instead of one icon, click on the little folder with a lot of sub things in it. And then scroll on down until you get to landscape material. And I'm going to drag this landscape material over to that slot. And it might just look really glossy, which is fine. It is doing its job. The next thing we need are textures. A lot of places you can get textures. One of them is Polyhaven. They have a lot of really good free tiling textures. Then you need to have grass or some grass and stones, a full stone one, and a snow one. So if you go to Polyhaven, this is their homepage, textures, you can search for, say, stone. Don't get something like a stone wall or something that has really noticeable patterns in it. So maybe instead of stone, do rock. And if we go over here on the left, we have terrain. So maybe you want to have something kind of flat, not a whole lot of detail. You don't want a lot of cracks in it. Those will be super noticeable later on. So something like this or rock 4 will work. And then same for the grass. And then same for the snow. When you download them, you're going to get a bit more than what you actually need. So when you unzip it, you'll have all this stuff and then a textures folder. And you'll have an AO, arm, diffuse, displacement, mask, normal, and roughness, because it doesn't know what render engine you are going to. For Unreal, we want the arm, the diffuse, and the normal. Those are the only ones we need. You can delete the others if you want. The arm is ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic. Diffuse is the color, and the normal is the normal map. You can also make these in Sampler if you want, or any other software. Polyhaven is nice and easy though. I already have my textures imported. I have a folder for each one: snow, snowy grass, and stone. So my grass has little bits of snow on it. I'm going to import these 3 textures in and double click on my material. And by default, this is the material going to our landscape right now. And that is going to change in a little bit. We're going to add a lot to this graph. But to begin, what you need to do is just drag and drop your textures onto your material graph. So I'll select these 3 and drag them up here. And RGB goes to base color. The normal goes to normal. And this is an ARM. You'll have to double check when you download textures. Some will be an ARD. The D is for displacement. So it is very important you know which one goes to what. But do know that the A is the first one, which is red. The R is green. And then the M is metallic, and that is the blue. So it goes RGB, ARM. That goes for all the naming conventions for Unreal textures. So red goes to ambient occlusion, green goes to roughness, and blue goes up to metallic. Let me close that one. There we go. And I'm going to hit save on this, and it is going to populate everywhere. That was a little bit quick. And you can see we have a bit of a tiling issue. It is very noticeable in its tiling. A few other issues as well, and might be kind of hard to tell on this one, but the reflections are a little bit off. It's a little bit shinier than it should be. And this is an issue with our ARM. So I'm going to double click on it. That opens it up in our content, or this window over here. And you want to scroll down until you get to sRGB, which is the color space, and you're going to turn it off. And we're immediately going to get an error. And it's going to bring us back to our material, and we can see that the error is over here. Click on that node for the ARM. Make this a little bigger. And when you scroll down a little bit, where it says sampler type color, you want to change that to linear color. And then hit save, and then it should come back to your terrain. And that will use the roughness and metallic maps a bit better, and you shouldn't have super glossy kind of errors on your material. For now, I'm going to stick with one material so we can go over some stuff, and then we will slowly expand this into a much bigger material with the other textures. And the first thing I want to do is try to fix some of the tiling. And there's a few ways to fix tiling in Unreal, depending on how you want to do it. The easiest one is with something called a texture coordinate. I'm going to create a texture coordinate, so TEX brings up texture coordinate, and that is going to go into a multiply, which you can hit tab and type out multiply, or hold down M and hold down left click, and you create a multiply node. I'm going to connect the texture coordinate to the A, and if you right click on the B, you can promote that to a parameter, and it's going to call this grass tiling. Naming these parameters are really important. If you duplicate one and it has the same name, when you change one later on, it'll change both of them. So do make sure that if you duplicate your parameters, you are updating the name. And this multiply node is going to go to the UV of each of our textures. And what this does is it just changes the tiling kind of after the fact. So instead of maybe being 4 by 4, you can change it to 10 by 10 or 0.1 by 0.1. So you can control the intensity of the UVs. If I hit save right now, it's going to just going to go flat green because my tiling default value is set to 0, meaning that there is no tiling. So it's just taking kind of a base color pixel from that texture and it's going everywhere. So we're going to have that base value maybe be 4, and that gets us back to what it is by default. I'm going to hit save and drag that over here, and then instead of having this material applied to the landscape, I'm going to right click on the material and create an instance of that material. And I'm going to rename it to I for material instance, and then drag that to the landscape. If you don't have this right here, just make sure you select your landscape and go on down to landscape material. So now I have the material instance applied to it. And when you double click on the material instance, instead of getting the whole graph, you get a very nice, much more simplified interface. You can see that parameter is up here, currently turned off. So I'm going to turn it on, and its default is 4. If I change it to 10, I now have tiling of 10, so it's gotten a lot bigger. If I bring it down to 1, or not a lot smaller, there's a lot more tiling. Bring it down to 1, that texture is getting larger. So I do maybe 0.1, it is now much harder to see that it is tiling. This is the kind of quick and easy, and sometimes it works for exactly what you need. But there are other ways that we can kind of set up nodes to make it hard, or to make the tiling hard to notice. So I'm going to go back to the main material, and I'm just going to select these 3 nodes and delete them. And I'm going to select all these connections and hold down Alt, and I'm just going to click on them and undo them. So now we are back to just some textures, not connected to a material, and I'm going to hit save, and it's going to reset back to just gray. The other type of tiling that I'm going to go over is called texture bombing. And if I hit tab and just type in bomb, you have texture bombing. And this does something a little bit different. It's going to kind of rotate and rotate and change up the tiling of the texture to make it a little bit harder to notice. My sRGB for the color, notice, will not go into my texture bombing. It says the float 3 is not compatible with a texture 2D. So this is a float 3, this one's a 2D texture. They're very similar, but you just have to right click on the texture sample and convert to texture object. Notice we no longer have all of those outputs, we just have one. And I'm going to drag the only option to the texture object on the texture bombing. And then the texture bomb can go to base color. I'm going to hit save. So it's going to go back to not looking great. That's okay. We need to create something pretty similar to what we created before, the parameters to change the tiling and the offset. But we already have tiling and offset on this texture bombing, so I'm going to right click on them and promote parameter. And this will be grass tiling. And then right click on offset and go to promote parameter, and this will be grass offset. So now if I hit save, if you hover over the tiling, it says default value 4. So for tiling, I'm going to have that default value of 4. And for offset, default value is 1. So I'm going to hit 1 for that, just so by default, it's going to be doing what the texture bombing wants to do. I'm going to go to the material instance of it and turn on the tiling and the offset. And I don't have my roughness and normal, so it looks a little flatter and a little bit glossier, but that's okay. And if I change my offset, you can see that it is changing how that material is tiling, and also have that tiling so I can scale it up or down just like before, but it will also kind of rotate it around to make it a little bit harder to tell that it's tiling. So texture bombing is quite nice. It is pretty easy to set up, and you get a good end result. The only issue is you have a lot more nodes. So all of this is this texture bombing is just for the color. So I need to create another bombing for my normal. Move these out of the way. And I'm going to right click on the normal map and go to convert to texture object, drag that output to the texture object input, and then the result is going to go to normal. And I'm going to right click on the ARM, convert to texture object, and you might notice we can't really use this right now because there's only one output and we have 3 different channels that we need to use. I'm still going to create the texture bomb. And we just need to create a third node for the ARM. It is called a breakout float 3. And what that does is it just breaks up this one into red, green, and blue. So the ARM or ARD or whatever texture you have is using red, green, and blue. This is kind of crunching it into 1, and then this node is breaking it back out into 3. So that result is going to go to the float 3. And then I have red, green, and blue. Red is going to go to ambient occlusion, green is going to go to roughness, and blue is going to go up to metallic. Instead of creating 4 more of these, 2 for the texture, or for the normal, and 2 for the ARM, I'm going to use these same ones because I want the tiling to always be the same for the color, the normal, and the ARM, so the textures don't mismatch. So I'm just going to drag the grass tiling over to tiling and the offset to offset, and then the same thing down here. So now I have the same tiling for all 3 textures, each one going into their own texture bombing, going into the landscape material. If I hit save, kind of fixes some of those reflections, and it looks a bit better. So this is a setup for my grass. The graph is quite messy right now. I like to try to organize as I go, just so it doesn't become a huge, colossal mess later on, because it's very easy to have a messy graph, especially once we start adding a lot of stuff to this. You are going to have crisscrossing lines. That's kind of inevitable. All right. So we have something that's working well for just our grass. And if we only needed grass, this would be great. But we're going to use grass. We're going to use snow and we're going to use stone. And we want to blend them all together nicely. Right now, this material only has one input. We can only have one texture going into it. We want to have 3 textures going into this final material. So we have to create some blends. On the material, click on it and come on down to where it says Use Material Attributes. That's going to break all of our connections. And this is going to be our final output. So I'm just going to drag this over here on the right. We'll use that later. And we need to remake all those material attributes that we just lost. So you hit Tab or right click and type in Make Material. You have Make Material Attributes. You have something very similar to what we just had. And again, I'm going to make you set up all of these connections. Red, green, and blue. And then this material attribute, I'm going to connect all the way over here. So we're going to have the same end result. Not going to look any different, but this will actually allow us to blend a lot more stuff together. And I'm just going to select all of this. So just drag and drop. I'm going to hit C to create a comment and just call this grass. And then since grass is green, it's going to pick a green comment box. There we go. And now you can just move that comment box and move everything inside of it together. The next thing I'm going to bring in is the snow. So I have my snow texture that I made from sampler. Don't need that displacement. It's going to get rid of it. I'm going to drag these textures in. And I have to make the exact same thing that I just created. So instead of remaking the whole thing, I'm going to select these 2 parameters, my 3 texture bombing, and this breakout float, and this material attribute, and hit Control D. The first thing I want to do, because I usually forget, change the name of these parameters to snow tiling and snow offset. And now I have to convert, so right click and use as texture, convert to texture object. And I will drag that over to my color. Do the same for the normal texture object. Drag to the texture bombing, and then finally the ARM, and drag that to texture object. So it goes a lot easier, or a lot faster, once you have one set up, because you can just duplicate those nodes that you need. I'm going to create a new comment and call this one snow, and I'll leave this one that's kind of off-white for the snow color. So right now we have similar issues we had before. We have one material output, and we have 2 materials that we need to blend into it. And we can make a material blend. However, we want to also have a mask. So the snow comes out on top of the landscape, and the grass is on the bottom. And we need a few new nodes for this. The first one is an absolute world position, which you can find if you just type in world position should come up. If you type in absolute world position, it does not usually show up. And what the absolute world position does is it gets the 3D coordinates for every pixel that's rendered on the screen. So it knows X, Y, and Z coordinates for whatever it is attached to. We're going to be using the Z because we only care about elevation up and down, because we want to have the snow on top and the grass on the bottom. And I'm going to not do that. Create a subtract node. And the Z is going to go into A. So that's kind of the max elevation. And then the snow blend, or the B, is going to become our blend height. So I'm going to right click on the B, promote that to a parameter, and then I'm going to rename this to snow grass blend height. We're going to make a clamp node, and clamp nodes restrict the range of whatever's coming into it between a set minimum and maximum. and we want to have a default maximum of a number bigger than 1, so mine is going to be about 5,000. So I'm going to promote the max, and I'm going to call this snow blend width. And this is going to be how many pixels the blend is going to be, kind of the transition between the grass and the snow. And the subtract is going to go up over here, so the minimum is 0, and then the maximum I'm going to set to 5,000. This is a number that's going to change whenever you have a different terrain or want to change a lot of different things. Then we need to divide them, back together. So the snow blend goes to B, the clamp goes into A, and then we need one more clamp. And we're going to have default values for this between 0 and 1, and that will allow it to be used as a mask. Because these numbers are way too big, the clamp brings all those numbers into a more reasonable range, so it can be used a bit more easily as a mask without breaking things. I'm going to consolidate this a little bit more. I'm going to select it and just call this snow and grass blending. You can change the color if you want, doesn't really matter. And now we need to figure out how we can blend these materials together. So I have snow, I have grass, and this is just an alpha. This is creating a mask that is based off of the real-world coordinates of my terrain. So I'm going to create a blend material attributes. This is basically just a blend node, if you know Designer or anything else that uses a blend node. And I'm going to put the snow on the bottom, so on B. The grass is going to go to A. And then this clamp node is going to go to my alpha, because this is our mask. A mask and an alpha, very, very similar, lots of overlap. And now this blend material, which has two materials in it, is going to go to our material attribute, to our terrain, and then hit save. So now it's going to be all snow. Yours might be different based off of your own terrain values and everything. And this is where you have to do a little figuring out. So snow blend height, probably don't want that set to 0 by default, but let's move it up. So now I go up a fair amount, gets up to all grass, so you can see that the snow is coming on the top of the mountains. It's going top down, which is what I want. This blend width, if you make it larger, we'll just increase that fall off. It's a lot of manual, just kind of figuring out what looks best for your specific terrain. But right now it is working. You also have the snow offset and the snow tiling if you want to change how it is tiling. Pretty hard to tell anything on the snow. It's a very simple material. So I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. Already we have a pretty good start for our terrain. I'm going to go back to the main material, and I'm going to drag in the stone textures now. So I have stone. Again, these were made in Designer, not in Designer, in Sampler. I'm going to drag them in, and I'm going to duplicate the tiling, the offset, the 3 texture bombings, the breakout, and the material attribute. Put them down here and make the exact same connections I had before. So right click, texture object, and then change these nodes from snow tiling to stone or rock, whatever you want to call it. Perfect. You're going to select all of these, hit C, and type in stone. And these comments are for you or for anyone else using this material, so they know where you put things. It makes it a lot easier if you can just really quickly read like, oh, that's the blending for the mask. This is the snow material. Makes it a lot more user-friendly. And we have to create one more mask. This mask is a bit easier. It's a much smaller mask. It's pretty much just one node with 2 promoted parameters. And I'm going to create a new node called World Aligned Blend. And what the World Aligned Blend does is it just controls the position and sharpness of a material blend. So it makes a mask and just figures out what is that mask going to look like, what angles, what position is it going to be. So this creates the mask that we actually need. And we just need to promote the blend sharpness and blend bias. So I'm going to right click on the sharpness and promote to parameter. And blend bias, right click, promote to parameter. And if you want, you can maybe call this stone blend sharpness, and then blend bias or blend fall off for the stone. And this is our mask. Much simpler. Going to move this over here. I do need to have another blend material attributes. So I'm going to tab blend material attributes. The snow and grass is going to go into the B. The stone, which is all the way over here, is going to go into A. And then you would think you would take the alpha and plug it into alpha, but if you do that, it won't actually work. It will give you an error when you try to save and use it. So what we want to do is use the vertex normals for the alpha. And then the second blend material attributes we just made is going to go to our landscape material. And when I hit save, hopefully we see some things. I do need to set some values over here. Right now they're both set to 0 and 0. So for the promoted parameter default value, I'm going to have that be 15. And then this default value for the blend bias is going to be -5. So now on those sharp angles, we're starting to turn it into stone. We have a little bit of snow on top. If you go back to your landscape material instance, you have all of these. Not sure why those didn't update. Oh, hit save. The sharpness is 15. And should have been set by default. I think I just did things a little out of order. And then if you want to change them, so that bias is going to have some of that snow creep back up the mountain. And the sharpness, yeah, so you have all sorts of control over how those materials are going to interact. So more or less snow between the stone. You'll also go have some stone on the grass if there's any angles that support it. And you can very quickly blend between all of your materials. So this is the kind of base material for our auto blend. I'm going to comment this and call this stone blending. Oops. Put that down here. And it's a pretty big graph, but it's just 2 masks for 3 materials. I'm going to create 2 more things. One of them is super easy. The other one's a little bit trickier. And it's going to be a color variation. I'm going to make it for the grass, but you could also have this for snow or stone or any other texture. And what it does is it's another way of breaking up the repetition by adding a little bit of a color variation. So I'm going to, let's see where to start. I'm going to create a texture coordinate and a multiply and a going to right click on the B and promote to parameter. And this one is going to be called snow, I'm going to call it grass color variation. And plug that into multiply. So this is just the base, what we did at the very beginning when we wanted to change the tiling of something. And now I need to have a texture, a noise. It's going to be a mask. I'm going to use a noise image, and a noise is just, black, white, gray, random mask. Unreal has them built in. If you click on this little gearbox on your content browser, you can go down to engine content, and it just gives you another folder, lots more stuff. And it's going to hit all in this kind of search, and then search for noise. And the one I want is called T-Noise01. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. I like this one. I'm going to drag it into my material editor. And then get rid of that search. And just set it back to whatever you want to look at. So now I have my texture sample. And that's just my noise. I'm going to drag the multiply into the UVs. And now need to create an actual color variation. And what this color variation is going to be is just a constant color. So I'm going to create a constant 3 vector. And right now, anyone else using this material would not be able to access this without going through the graph. And I want them to have access to it over here on the instance. So on this constant 3, I'm going to right click and convert to parameter. I'm going to rename it to just color variation. And I'm going to double click on the black square in the middle to get my color picker and move it up to white. White by default means it does nothing at all. And I'm going to create a multiply node. I'm going to plop the top value into A. And I'm going to create a node we haven't used yet called a lerp. And a lerp is used to smoothly blend between two inputs. So you have an A and a B, and the third one is an alpha, and it's just going to kind of blend nicely between them. Doing some math behind the scenes, kind of like a material blend. And this texture sample, the noise, is going to be our alpha. And the multiply node is going to go into A. And this part's actually done. So if you wanted to use this on multiple different textures, you would just duplicate these nodes and then do the next step to make all of the connections. Right now, if I try to plug in my material to my multiply node, I get an error. It is not compatible, does not like it at all. So you can't do that. You can't just drag and drop my grass material into this color variation. What you can do is get material attributes, which is a very small node, and I'm going to plug that in. By default, it doesn't actually get anything. So you need to click on it and then click on the plus icon over here. And it should bring you to base color by default. If not, you can choose base color, which should be at the very top. So now I'm saying get the base color attributes. And that can go into, the base color can go into that multiply node. I'm going to bring this up here for now. There, and it's also going to go, the material attributes base color is going to go into our lerp. So we're going to be combining the color values with this color variation. So if this was green and this was blue, it would mix the green and blue together. Now that we have the get material attributes, we need to put it somewhere. And we have material attributes here, and we have the end of the lerp over here, which is going to be our new base color. So we're combining the base color here with the color, multiplying them together, combining it or mixing them with this mask, and this is the output for our new base color. The reason we're using white by default is if you double click on that again, the default value for white is all 1. So 1, 1, and 1 for red, green, and blue. And if you multiply anything by 1, it remains the same. So multiplying the base color by white is the same as keeping it as it is. The second you change that color, you're now multiplying it by different values, so that's where you're going to get that color change. So default white, so it doesn't do anything. And I need to make a new node called set material attributes. And same as the get, I need to click on this plus sign to get base color. And the material attribute to material attribute over here. And then this lerp node goes into the base color, because that is the final combination of all of the material blending. And then just have to figure out where was the grass going originally. It was going to this node. I'm going to move that out a bit. And over here, I'm going to make a new connection. Oops, make sure that was right. Going into A. So I'm going to hit save, and hopefully no errors pop up. And by default, it does nothing, which is perfect. So on the instance, I'm going to turn on the color variation. And then scrolling down to global vector parameter, I'm not sure what that is, values, I'm going to turn on this color variation as well. So I'm going to get a very obvious new color. I'm going to just get red. Hit OK. And then find my color variation and just change that tiling. So now you can see I have that mask pattern mixing in red with my original base color. So maybe if I bring the value down to 0.01 or maybe 0.005, there we go. So now it's harder to see the pattern of that mask, or the noise mask, and then instead of red, maybe I'll get just a different green. Hit OK. Bring that over here. Maybe a darker green. Hit OK. So it's a nice way to break up, again, a little bit of that repetition, give it a little bit more variation. So I'm going to drag a box around this, make a comment called grass color variation. Put that right there. And we are almost done, don't worry. I'm going to organize this a little bit. And the final nodes, it's one node that we're going to make 3 times, is a very simple node, and it's for very specific situations for terrains. But let's say you wanted to have, say, over here, you wanted to have a cave. You wanted to have, just a hole right here, so you can model a cave, go into Maya, make cool caves, have some stones, have a nice kind of outcrop for it. Right now you can't, because you cannot go into face mode and delete these faces. You can't do anything like that. Luckily, there's a very easy node that gives us that option. So might as well put it in. And it is on, you just need to have the opacity mask, which by default the make material attributes is going to give you. If you have a brand new material, you would just have to, see, let me make a material real quick. So if you're not using the material that we're using, you're just using a default material, so you're not using the attributes of it, you would just have to bring the blend mode to masked, and then that turns on your opacity mask. But luckily, this one already has it turned on, and I'm going to hit tab and type in landscape visibility mask, and drag that into our opacity mask. I'm going to duplicate it and drag it down here. Opacity mask, and duplicate it and drag it down here to opacity mask. Then hit save. not going to give you anything by default, and it's not an option in the material instance. But what it is an option for is, let's say I wanted to have a cave right here. When you go back to your landscape and you go to, what is it? Sculpt. One of these. Yeah, so it's in the sculpt, and you have this option for visibility. You have your brush size and fall off, and then if you just paint, it's going to glitch a little bit at first and then come back to you. And what it's going to do is just paint a hole in your landscape. This allows you to walk through it, and then you could maybe put some nice rocks around it, do some sculpting on it, and then make an actual cave network. If you want to get rid of it, hold down Shift, and you can paint it back. So this is our terrain, material terrain with some nice auto blending. Kind of a lot of nodes, but once you have it, you can easily swap out these textures for different textures and have different versions of it. You can add a fourth texture if you want and blend it with basically the same graph with different default values. So maybe you have snow going into dirt, going into grass, or whatever you want. A lot of different options for how you can make that work. And then it all goes into that one material node applied to the terrain.